Thank you, Vernon. Thank you, Vernon. Thank you to the team. That was amazing time of worship. Wonderful. It's so good to be with you this morning. And so good to have a time together that we can just spend the morning, part of the afternoon, just thinking about what we're going to be doing in the future, spending time together. Do you know, it's a bizarre experience for me being here with so many of you because we go through this year of Uptick together and get to know each other really well. And I know many of you really well. And then you all come back together and you know which cohort you're in and I don't know which cohort you're in. And so I feel like I'm really connected with all of you and then you're connected with certain different people. And I'm trying to work out who knows who. It's just a very strange experience for me. But it's great to be here with you all. What we're going to do is we're going to have, I'm just going to do some little bits of talks through the morning to kind of just start thinking through the Alum Network and what it's going to be. And I want you to help me think about it as well. And then we're going to hear from some amazing leaders who are going to be sharing with us. And really, my hope would be that they're speaking vision into our future from their perspectives. We've invited people who've got some particular ministries and some particular wisdom and charism that they carry, some things that God's done in their lives that we want to kind of speak into us at this particular juncture. And I just want to remind you, just at the beginning of today, that the vision with Uptick has always been movemental. So the vision of Uptick has never been that we want to just equip a few pastors and leaders to do things a bit better. It's never been simply that we want to do some skills training, that we just want you to, be a little bit more highly skilled than you were before. It's been about a sea change that really enables us to see something movemental happening. And we want the region and beyond to see something happen in our generation that is fundamentally different from what's gone on up until this point in our lifetimes. And so that's really what we're thinking about the next phase of as we think about the Alum Network. I feel like there's been a lot of foundational work over the last decade or so, and just more than that, maybe nearly 15 years now. And you guys and some of the people who wanted to be here today but can't be, and will be kind of playing catch-up, you guys have a kind of head start by being here today. You're really evidence of that. You've seen transformation, you've seen those of you that are alum, you've seen the impact of Uptick. You know that there's been that transformative process that's gone on in your own hearts. As I've experienced that too, in my life, back when I was a young adult, and continuing on. But we also know that just a one-off experience over 1 year is not going to be enough for the long haul. And so that's why we're thinking about this network. And I spoke about that yesterday, the vision behind it, but this morning I want to paint a picture of what we hope it can be. And I'm going to do that in kind of little bite-sized chunks. So first thing I want to say is this. I want the Alum Network to be run as a partnership between the Uptick staff and the members of the Alum. So that's you. And if you are an Uptick alum, we're going to be asking you to help us to shape and craft what the network is going to look like. So we need you to be telling us what you need to be effective, to be Jesus-shaped leaders. And we all know that we are only partially Jesus-shaped, and we've got a long way to go. And we know that we're talking about the words, the ways, and the works of Jesus. And we know that there are certain areas where we've been equipped more than others. Many of us, if we're coming from the Baptist tradition, and not all of us in the room come from that tradition, we come from different traditions, but if we're coming from the Baptist tradition, that tends to major on the words. of Jesus. And one of the things with Uptick is we've tended to bring the challenge that we also need to take on the lifestyle, the ways of Jesus. And that's difficult in 21st century America. It's also difficult, to be honest, in a lot of church settings. I mean, weirdly, we seem to have set up church in a way that makes it difficult to behave like Jesus. I mean, isn't that weird? I mean, that's like, oh, well, I can't really do church and live like Jesus. I mean, which one, Lord? Do you want me to do church or do you want me to live like Jesus? You know, it's like, come on, you know. So the ways of Jesus, and then also the works of Jesus, and the works of Jesus, to me, fall into two broad categories. They fall into the, although they're very connected, they fall into the kind of the categories of justice and making the wrong things right in all of those areas to do with justice, and then also the kind of naturally supernatural stuff as well. I mean, Jesus was literally bringing heaven to earth in both of those areas, wasn't he? And you know, some of us have been moving in some of those areas, some of us haven't. Again, the church often seems to be oriented to either outsource those things or resist them. And so we're on a journey. I just want to say to you that if you are really set on being Jesus-shaped, then you have to resolve that you're going to live a lifetime of battle. It doesn't lend itself to a comfortable life. There was a point for my wife Ellie and me when we were leading the church in England, and I'd given up part of my job. I was the senior pastor of a church, and we'd seen a lot of growth, and we'd seen lots of people come to faith in the city, and there was lots of good things happening. And we knew that God was calling us to give part of my time with an associate of mine, Rich Robinson, that the two of us were to give part of our time to start helping to spread that move mentally in the UK and in Europe, and work with other churches and other leaders. And for the first time, we started to get real pushback from our church. And the pushback was, we're not paying you to give this away. Yeah, we're paying you to do this for us. Hang on. We're paying you. What do you mean you're giving up part of your time? We don't want a part-time pastor. We want a full-time pastor. We don't want you going down to 75% so that you can go off, swanning off around Europe, doing this thing with other churches. We want you doing this with us. And the thing is that we were being motivated by the Great Commission, and it says go. And I mean, that work is now in Europe, is now in European countries all over the place. It's in Germany and Denmark and Norway and France, and I mean, it goes on Spain, and it's in Australia, it's in South Africa, went beyond Europe, and so on. But we were getting pushback, and then there were accusations. People started saying, you guys are only doing this to make money. Actually, what we'd done was we'd set it up so that we were paid exactly the same as we were paid for church. We weren't making any money from it. In fact, we were making less money because we could only make as much money as we were paid from church if the ministry raised enough money to fill that salary. But the salary was the top cap. But we had to actually explain that in a public meeting that was called by people who were accusing us of using the church's DNA to make money for ourselves, when we had to kind of have this, and it was all this accusation. And there came a point, it was very hard, and these were people who'd known us for 20 years who were bringing these accusations. There came a point where I remember Ellie and I were sitting down, and we just came to this realization. We said, gosh, if we're going to do this movemental thing, we just have to resolve that our whole life is going to be a battle. We're just going to be battling all our lives, and we have to learn to be at peace in the middle of it. Because the world and the enemy don't want you to do that. What they want is you to live a comfortable, inoffensive life where you basically just function, if you're a church leader, where you function as a chaplain to Christians. There's nothing wrong with being a chaplain. Chaplain can be a great evangelistic job, but being a chaplain to Christians who just want you to look after them and feed them from God's word is not movemental leadership. And that's what most churches want from us. And so if we are going to go on this journey, then we're going to have to equip each other. We're going to have to watch each other's backs. We're going to have to encourage each other. We're going to have to stand together. We're going to have to be resolved. We're going to have to know that if there is going to be at some point in the future another awakening, that the groundwork is going to be a battle and it's going to be hard, but it's also going to be joy-filled, and there's also going to be levels of encounter with God that go beyond what we've had before. And it's for the joy set before us that we're going to go into these things. And so I'm really giving an appeal today, not just for financial resources. I think that is part of it. I think if you're part of the Alum Network, we're not going to be able to fund the Alum Network through just through the donations like we've funded Uptick through the Pay It Forward. That is part of it. We will be able to use some donations for that, but if the Alum Network keeps growing, eventually we're going to have to ask the Alum to help fund the Alum. I mean, as we go along, we can't just fund it from the folks who've been funding the original Uptick program. So there is part of that. There is a financial commitment that we'll have to think about. We haven't even worked out the details of what that will look like yet, but we're going to have to pay our way through that at some point. But more that also, we're going to need it to be a partnership between the Alum and the staff. How's it going to work? What do we actually need? We're going to need you guys to tell us what's needed to do the work of becoming Jesus-shaped. How do you need support? What are the things that are best going to help you to thrive as a leader going forward? We're going to need volunteers so that we can actually do the training and the equipping and the pastoral care and support and the missional stuff that we're going to need to do as an Alum Network. So as you hear about the things today, and as we're thinking about what the Alum Network could look like, I'd love you to be thinking both about what you need, but also about whether God's calling you to participate as somebody to help us make the Alum Network work. I feel like the network's going to aim and to support and serve our alum in a number of different ways. And these are things so far that have come to mind. Firstly, continued access to training and teaching resources. I feel like in some ways, everything that we do in the Uptick year is some of the most important teaching and training I think that we think that you need as the kind of basic functional teaching for this Jesus-shaped life. And so we give that to you. But there's an element to which it's kind of like a missional, movemental leadership taster buffet, where you do a year where you have some aspects of that training. There's so much more that could be done. And I think with the Alum Network, we have the opportunity to do the deep dive on some of those things. So some of the things that we've touched on in the Uptick year, we now have the opportunity to go deeper. And we have the opportunity for that to be steered by you. And not everybody will want to do everything. But it's like, you've started doing some stuff on, some of those life shapes, and you've done an hour of something, and you'd like to actually, the discipleship square. Yeah, that sounds like it's a useful concept. We had a couple of hours on it. I'd really like to get good at leadership and go deeper on how to do that. We can do that with the Alum. Or, something like some of the naturally supernatural stuff. Sure, we've done some prophetic prayer. I'd like to really go deeper on learning how to press into the supernatural life of a Jesus-shaped leader in a way that's not weird or trying to manipulate people. And I'd like to go deeper into that stuff. These are things that we can do in the Alum Network. We can do them online. There's probably times where we can do stuff in person. So teaching and training is going to be a really important thing. And we can do that internally with the team and with each other. I think there's going to be lots of people in the room who've learned best practice. There's things that you've learned that other people need to know. So we can do training with each other. We can have the team training. And also, we will have the resources that we can bring in some of the best teachers and trainers, as we sometimes do with Uptick during the year as well. We can do that for our alum. So that's one of the things that we definitely will do. The second thing is I think that we can really aim to facilitate peer networks and opportunities, excuse me, and opportunities to continue to walk alongside each other. And one of the things that we've learned through Uptick Catalyst is, the original Upticks that we've done drew from the whole state or the region around Virginia, quite a wide area, and we just kind of pull people in. But with Catalyst, we've pulled people in from specific regions. And at the moment, your sense of affiliation as alum is going to be with your cohort, and that's great, and you can keep doing that long term. And we'll see later that we can actually, with the digital platform we've got, we're going to be able to tag people, so you're going to be able to find it super easy to identify with the online connectivity. You'll be able to identify your cohort members and connect with them, and things like that's going to be really easy. But I think that going forward, it's going to be really good to find ways to connect Upticks who are local to each other as well. So it's really easy to see people in person, to get coffee together, to do things locally. And we want to find ways to build out the alum network in local regions. And we think that that's going to be a way to really build support as well. So we want to be thinking about that. So those of you that are more shepherd on the fivefold, Ephesians 4 fivefold, I'd love you to get your shepherding caps on, or whatever you call it, get your crook maybe, and start thinking about how do we do that? How do we build the kind of relational networks that go beyond just, yeah, I've got some friends who are Upticks, to something that really feels like if you're an Uptick alum, you are not a leader who is isolated, but you're a leader who is connected and supported. And there are people that, I was thinking the other day about how, I don't know whether you notice this, but I'm thinking about how confession gets harder as you get older and as you get more senior in leadership. I'm just thinking this about myself. It gets harder. I feel like I don't have any less brokenness in my life than when I was in my 20s. But now that I'm in my 50s, I just don't know many people I don't lead. And it's just harder. I think somebody said, I think John said yesterday, it's good for the soul but bad for the reputation. It's like, who do you talk to? We need peers. And we need people that are alongside us that we trust. It's just one of those many aspects, isn't it, of the importance of having these networks of people around us. So that would be the second thing. So teaching and training, peer networks. Another one would be, I really think there's going to be power in building connections between pastors and churches and business leaders. I just think that's something that's been really neglected. A lot of the apostles in the church have been pushed out by non-apostolic churches that really only value teachers and shepherds. And so they put their energy and their gifting into business. And the enemy is always trying to separate the apostles and the prophets and the teachers and the shepherds. And usually that's the way the enemy does that, by the way, is by removing the evangelists, because the evangelists are the ones that provide the connection. There's more parachurch organizations run by evangelists than any other of the fivefold. And so the enemy's trying to separate those fivefold ministries away from each other. Yeah. And I think there's something that we have the opportunity with the Uptick Alum Network to connect the apostolic business leaders and the church leaders. In fact, Scott and Steve are going to speak about an example of that later. That's something I'd love to see happening. We'd love to help alum in their devotional journey and ongoing spiritual formation. I mean, who knows that your spiritual formation doesn't stop once you start being a church leader? It's barely started, hasn't it? And suddenly you're leading everybody else. We'd love to have opportunities to encounter God in new ways. And inner healing as well. I would just love us to get to the point where if you're an Uptick alum, there are regular opportunities to go on inner healing retreats, God encounter retreats, spiritual times where you can just encounter God and ways that you can encounter God in new ways that you haven't done before. Wouldn't that be amazing? So that's something I would love for us to start to see happening. Another thing is that the alum network is not going to stay as it feels like now because Uptick is going global. And Laura and Sonia were in Jakarta just a little while ago. And so that is going to bring a whole load of new opportunities as well. And I feel that God's been speaking prophetically to me that we're coming into a season that the next awakening, this is something, you can weigh this, I think this is something that the Lord said to me very clearly, that the next awakening is going to has components that is needed, some of which are here in the West, some of which are in the global South and East. And there are folks in other parts of the world, for example, that know how to bring multiplication to the church, which we don't really know how to do. We have amazing theological education, we have lots of financial resources, but basically most of the church in the West has gone to sleep and doesn't know how to wake up. Whereas there are parts of the church in other parts of the world that are in explosive multiplying growth right now. Yeah? And as Uptick begins to grow globally, I think that it's not just about us helping them with the things that we can bring from an education point of view, but I think that they are going to bring things to us that, boy, we really need. And so I think I really want us in the Uptick Alum Network over the next few years to begin to learn what does it mean to learn globally from other alum. And there's going to be interaction. So that's something to watch. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think it's going to be an important part. And then I also want us to begin to link with the other key apostolic ministries that come out of the BGAV. And there are some kind of other sister ministries. Kairos, the campus ministry, really wants to connect with Uptick. The leaders of Kairos have been saying, we do young adults, you guys do young adults, why are we not connected? It seems crazy. And so we've been having lots of conversations with them, and I think that there's going to be more connection with the colleges and the college campuses. So that's something to be looking for. Fresh Expressions, which works with different congregations to revitalize congregations. V3, which is church planting, Missio Alliance, and others. There's a real desire with those different apostolic ministries to work together. And so I think for us as the Alum Network, I want to see how we can integrate with them. So there's just some of the things on the horizon. These are all things that I want us to be doing together, thinking about together, engaging with together. And what I'd say to you is, as much time as you've got that you want to connect with the Alum Network, we want to work with you to build into those things. And I think you'll find that although it may take a bit of time, it's going to enhance your ministry, it's going to help you to go deeper with the Lord, and it's going to help you to be more movemental. The only other thing I'd say, just as I finish, is I want to increase access to Uptick itself. So what we're talking about at the moment, if you think about Jesus' methodology, Jesus worked with 12, which is why we tend to use cohorts of 12 with Uptick. If you're in Catalyst, then you kind of have a half cohort, but then they do come together sometimes as well. But generally we go for cohorts of about 12. We're just trying to copy Jesus. I mean, it's kind of like Uptick, let's copy Jesus. That could be our strapline, couldn't it? But the other thing that Jesus did was he actually preached to huge crowds, didn't he? I mean, you know, the feeding of the 5,000 was probably actually 20,000 because it was only counting the men. 20,000 plus. You have the Sermon on the Mount. He actually started with the crowds, and everybody had access. And then out of that, there were people who really chose to follow him, which was called the disciples, which is an undisclosed number. But there were at least 72 at one point when he sent them out in Acts 2. There were 120 in the upper room. There were way more than 12, whatever. You know, those were people that were called the disciples. And then from that group of the disciples, he chose 12, who were the apostles. Yeah. So there's this kind of funneling effect going on. And what we want to do is we want to increase access to Uptick. So up until now, if you're an Uptick alum, you came into Uptick because you were invited. You were identified and invited. We're going to have a version of Uptick, hopefully in the next year or so, where anybody can apply. And we're going to do that by partnering with churches. We're going to do a pilot here with the Life Church, with Vernon, where we're going to try it first in this region. If it works, we'll try it in some other regions, where we partner with a church to have a version of Uptick where we do the teaching in more of a public space like this, where you've got you do the teaching with everybody, and then people break out into side rooms for their cohorts, still the same size cohorts. And maybe also where we don't go straight in with that, but we have single kind of days, maybe like an Uptick Academy type thing, where we just have single day training that anybody can come to, where we begin to get the name out there, we begin to make it much more accessible, and we have a system where people can actually just come and access the Uptick teaching. I think what that will do is it will give us a bigger constituency of Upticks at the front end that then we can identify from all of those people, maybe for a second year, who are the genuinely movemental leaders amongst them that we could maybe then invite into a second scholarship year, like the scholarship year that you guys did. I don't know, it's still a work in process, something like that. But what that will mean is that over the next few years, the Uptick alum will increase numerically quite significantly. And so it will become even more important that you guys are proactive about identifying people who are local to you, building community and those sorts of things. If you have a lot of people, then it only works well from a community point of view if those people are connecting with specific groups within that, and you know who those groups of people are that you're connecting with, if that makes sense. So I'm going to talk more over the course of the morning about the different things that we're going to do, but those are some of the kind of headlines about where I think we're going to go with the alum. And I'd love you to be thinking about what you think it should be looking like. Are there things I'm missing? Are there things that would be helpful? Are there things that you feel like, yeah, I'd like to participate in that? We'd love to hear from you. Great. Well, we're gonna hear from some other folks now, and I just wanted to throw that in at the beginning so that you're beginning to get your thinking caps on and beginning to just ruminate on what your role could be. I think we're going to Sonia now. Thanks, Sonia.